this is Kevin Deal at Upscale Audio, and today is Grumpy Kevin talking about preamps. Why am I grumpy? I just got back from the Consumer Electronics Show where I noticed that some manufacturers came out with some more shit that I think was overpriced, and they're putting fewer parts in and hoping that you will believe in fairy dust. So let's see if we can avoid that. Let's talk about preamps. As I said, there's no such thing as fairy dust. And every manufacturer, not everyone, but many of them, will have a flagship preamp that's got a bunch of transformers and a bunch of tubes in it that they sell for $10,000 or $20,000. And then they have a $5,000 empty box, and they will say that it has trickle-down technology from our flagship. And that is the biggest bunch of bullshit ever, because you need to understand something. There's no such thing as a new preamp design. Nothing. Nothing has changed in decades, and I don't expect that it will. It's always the same thing. It's going to be one tube and a JFET or an FET, which is like a hybrid, or maybe a couple of tubes, or it's going to be 4 tubes, or the better preamps are going to have maybe 6 tubes. And then the very, very best ones are going to have tube rectification, like a 5AR4 rectifier tube, or tube regulation, or a tube current source, because then those preamps are really going to have the most tube presence. I mean, they're going to be the most tube-like. But to get that, I mean, it does cost a lot more money to build that way. And then the most expensive are going to be dual mono, so there's no shared parts. And then if it was dreamy, dreamy, dreamy world, you would get point-to-point wiring, but that almost never happens because point-to-point wiring is just too damned expensive. I mean, you can get it with brands like Atmosphere. I mean, hats off to those guys. Incredible workmanship. But you can get them in a PrimaLuna, and I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. So let's take a peek at a preamp that sells for about $69.95. That sounds great. And why wouldn't it? You can make a pretty good sounding tube preamp for about $1,200 and sell it and make money. I mean, something that would sound respectable. When somebody says, well, it's a $5,000 preamp and it sounds great, well, that's not a miracle. I mean, frankly, it's surprising if it didn't sound great. It's not tough. You need to be pragmatic when you spend your money. You cannot believe in fairy dust. You need to use Google Images. Look at the product that you're considering. Type it into Google and go to Images and look at it with the lid removed so you can see what's in the box. See if there's a lot of empty real estate. See how much it weighs. This is a very nice preamp, and it sounds great. It's $69.95, major name brand. Let's take a look and see what goes on. It's got 2 6H30 tubes and a couple of JFETs, respectable. Nice transformer, respectable. The volume control is made up of 4 chips called DS16610. Those sell for about $4 each. And then, nice preamp. Why wouldn't it be? So, it is balanced, and it's a balanced design. That's a plus if you want to use it in a fully balanced system. And, you know, nothing wrong with it. That's for sure. But is there a better option? This is a PrimaLuna DiaLogue Premium. This preamp is used by more reviewers than any other preamp that I can think of. And it's only $31.99. Whereas this preamp is $69.95 and weighs 16.3 pounds. This preamp weighs 52.9 pounds. It's tube rectified. There's 2 5AR4 rectifier tubes. Underneath this cover are 2 massive Potted, that means that they're encased in epoxy to protect them for a lifetime. Toroidal transformers. The reason that PrimaLuna uses toroidal transformers is because toroids do not radiate EMI and noise and crap the same way that C-core and R-core transformers do. They are much quieter. So why doesn't everybody just use them? Because they are too expensive. Companies don't use them. A couple companies do. Manley uses them in the Chinook Phonostage and on the Steelhead. Balanced Audio Technology, hats off to them. They use them. But they can cost 5 times more, and transformers are the single largest cost in building a preamp. Look, you don't need more power to overcome noise. That's what people seem to do. They think, I need more dynamic range, I better get more power. That's not how you do it. You do it by dropping noise floor. That's what PrimaLuna does. So, 2 5AR4 rectifier tubes, 3 12AU7s per channel. The reason they use 12AU7s is this. There's more 12AU7s being made today than any other part. That means that you can get all different colors if you choose to down the road from all kinds of manufacturers. And then if you want to do something called tube rolling, there's more. At Upscale Audio, we have over 12,000 vintage 12AU7s in stock from every company, from Sifty in France, Mullard, La Radio Technique, Siemens, all the cool stuff. So just by changing 2 of these 12AU7s, you can change the sonic tilt one direction or another. That's how you get perfect tonal balance. You don't do it by going out and getting another pair of $1,000 interconnects. It's not predictable. You do it with just 2 tubes. And we can help you with that. On the PrimaLuna website, there's a tube rolling page that'll even give you advice on how things work. It's incredible. But talk about incredible. Let's take a peek at what goes on inside. As you can see, this is a dual mono design. That means there's no shared parts between the 2 channels. That's how you get the best channel separation. But manufacturers don't like to do it. It costs a lot of money. So, right here and right here, you have big, massive toroidal transformers. As I mentioned, toroids don't radiate EMI and noise and crap the same way that R-core and C-core transformers do. But to make sure that this preamp is whisper quiet, PrimaLuna invented a circuit called the AC offset killer. This circuit, it's actually the same circuit as the PS Audio Humbuster that sells for $399. PrimaLuna's parent company actually invented this like decades ago, and it's designed to keep the transformers inert. So even if you've got some electrical problems, it helps to keep them from humming, regardless of the condition of the electricity in your home. Again, we're trying to drop noise floor just a little bit more. The entire signal path is wired with Swiss-made, silver-plated, oxygen-free copper with a Teflon dielectric. No printed circuit boards in the signal path. PCBs. It's so funny because we spend so much money on interconnects. It's not unusual for people. I bought an interconnect. I use one of these preamps in my home. I'm running a 7-meter interconnect with a retail price of $50,000, and I'm plugging it into a preamp that sells for $31.99. But the thing is, it's so funny to me that people will spend $1,000 on an interconnect, but they fail to look inside the preamp that they're buying. And if they were to look inside, they would see like crappy computer ribbon cables and cheap PCBs. I mean, what's high-end about that? This is proper high-end. As I mentioned, this preamp is tube rectified. So these are the 2 5AR4 rectifier tubes. These are the 6 12AU7s, 3 for each channel. Very slick, very smart what they did. They wired them in parallel internally and then in parallel to each other. So if one of the tubes goes sideways on you and you don't have a tube tester, you're most likely never going to know that you have a tube problem. Very slick way of doing things. Instead of the volume-controlled chips that we had seen earlier, PrimaLuna uses a motorized Alps blue velvet potentiometer because they wanted to stay in the analog world. You would never know that they used a chip. I mean, because people don't look inside, but, you know, they just didn't want to do that. Analog is the way to go. And if you're going to go analog, blue velvet is the gold standard because the Alps blue velvet tracks better, so you get a stable stereo image, and it stays quiet, and it lasts. The resistors that you've seen here are pink in color, and it's not because this is like Barbie world time or something. They're pink because they are made by TACMan. So if you took another preamp and you sent it off to a guy that does mods and tweaks and upgrades and you slipped him $1,000, TACMan's what you want to put in. What else would you want to put in? Maybe you'd want to put in some of these capacitors. These are Mundorf, made in Germany, silver gold MCAP EVOs. Badass stuff. These other guys are not going to spend the money on this type of a capacitor. They just cost too much. But PrimaLuna is about using, just the best stuff on planet Earth. Even the relays that they use back here. Look, man, these other guys, they use relays. Some companies will use relays to select between the inputs. See, a selector switch is bad news. And if you see a preamp that uses a regular switch, I would avoid it because switches never turn off the other things that you're listening to completely. There's always bleed over that occurs. Plus, switches deteriorate with time. So what PrimaLuna did is this. They mounted hermetically sealed Japanese relays in the rear of the preamp, back where the RCA jacks are. So when you select this input, the CD, let's say, that relay closes, giving you the best contact possible. All the other relays are left open, so it acts as a gatekeeper to keep out noise. There's no way for the signal to get in. The other thing that they do, which we don't even talk about because it's boring, is underneath each relay is a little circuit that's designed to present a perfect 100,000 ohm impedance to whatever you're plugging in. What does that mean? If you have a tubed phonostage or a tube DAC or any other tube component, any component, even if it's solid state, they like to see a consistent, steady 100,000 ohm input impedance. That's how they're going to sound their best. I've never seen another company build that into a preamp, ever, at any price. They just don't do it. They go, It doesn't cost that much to do it, but it's really worth it because it pushes the level of performance that much more. Now let's talk about specifications, because people don't think about those things too much. There's two specs you need to think about. One of them is how much, and I don't want to do a propeller head thing on you guys and gals, but you got to know about this stuff. You got to think about how much gain the preamp has. When you use a preamp and you're plugging a DAC into it, or a phonostage, whatever it is, usually you are not adding gain to your system. You are attenuating gain or attenuating volume. Why am I telling you this? Because this preamp has only 10 dB of gain. Why is that important? You're going to see some preamps out there that have 27 dB of gain, 26 dB of gain. And those preamps are going to have problems with tube noise. When you have that much gain, you got to do something with it. You got to do something with the thermal noise. You got to do something with the problem of having that much idle gain that's not being used. And so if you poke around and ask people, you're going to ask them, they're going to go, oh yeah, my preamp's really hard on tubes. Well, of course it's hard on tubes because you have so much gain that you're not using. 10 dB of gain is very, very smart. And that's why people say this preamp is quieter than solid state preamps on the market. And then one more specification you got to think about is output impedance. The input impedance of your amplifier needs to be 10 times or higher the output impedance of the preamp. Most power amplifiers that are solid state have an input impedance of about 50,000 ohms. So you need a preamp with an output impedance of 5,000 ohms or less. But there's a handful of power amps made by companies like Past Labs, Parasound, and a handful of others that have kind of a low input impedance. And if you have one of those power amps, that you need to be aware that this preamp has an output impedance of only 268 ohms. So literally, you can use this with any amp on the market, now or down the road. No matter where you're going, you're not going to have an issue with that. Because with an output impedance of 268 ohms, what's 10 times that? 2,600 ohms? I mean, you're never going to find an amplifier that measures like that. So you don't have to worry about that as an issue. And then lastly, it's got a real remote control. I mean, look at this. It's not some piece of crap. I mean, can you imagine paying $10,000 for a preamp and getting a little junky plastic remote control? This is a proper remote control. It's made out of machined aluminum. I mean, look at it. It's a piece of art. It even has these fabulous neoprene rings to protect your furniture, and it weighs something. It feels good in the hand. It's very well laid out. You can go out directly into all your inputs here. If you get a PrimaLuna power amplifier, which are just unfreaking believable, you can switch from triode to ultralinear operation while you're listening. I mean, this is the thinking of this company. It is built to last a lifetime. Something that is iconic, that will last you, and that you'll be proud to own years down the road. That's really what this company is about. Shop at Upscale Audio. We've got the largest inventory of tubes in the country. We make special buys all the time. We got a beautiful 10,000 square foot showroom here in Laverne, California, and we will get you the hookup. I promise you, I will treat your system just like my own. I will take care of you. Thanks.